and welcome back to the channel. My name is Muriel, and in this video I will be doing a review of Octavia E. Butler's Xenogenesis trilogy, which includes the novels Dawn, Adulthood Rights, and Imago. This is the third work I've now read written by Butler. The first was her Earthseed duology, and Parable of the Sower is my second favourite dystopian novel, though I'll have to reread it someday to confirm or infirm that. The second was her standalone novel Kindred, which I thought was fine. I wasn't originally going to read this particular trilogy, and I wrote a summary of it instead a few years ago, but then I changed my mind and bought, these very nice looking physical copies when I was in London last year. Xenogenesis is what I like to call a looser trilogy. All three books follow one another chronologically, but you can easily read Dawn as a standalone or stop after Adulthood Rights. This is also very firmly theming-driven science fiction, which I love, but the series also suffers from significant flaws that progressively tarnished my enjoyment of it. So whilst this will not be a rant review as such, there will be some salt pouring. And some spoilers as well, unfortunately, because I just won't be able to properly delve into the series' world-building and theming otherwise. To give a basic idea of the story, rapey aliens go brrrr. On a more serious note, sometime in the future, human beings almost nuked themselves and the planet out, but lo and behold, an alien species called the Oankali comes along to scoop up and save the surviving humans and what remains of Terran life. Except there's a pretty massive catch, because of course there is. The Oankali decide to save humanity because they want to trade genetic material with them. And by trading, I mean grooming and raping. Sorry. Mating and hybridizing. Indeed, the Oankali are a symbiotic, or rather parasitic, but your mileage may vary here, species, and they regularly need to acquire genetic material from other species to keep their own going. What's more, the Oankali have 3 reproductive categories: male, female, and ooloi, the latter being what allows the Oankali to hybridize with other completely unrelated species. Dawn follows the beginning of this process, this interspecies relationship, and centers on Lilith Eapo, a woman awakened, then progressively groomed by the Oankali to accept their offer of trade and act as a go-between to encourage other surviving humans to do the same. And if they do, they get to go back to a healed Earth with their alien partners. Books 2 and 3, however, follow 2 of Lilith's hybrid children, one male, the other ooloi. This means each volume features a single character point of view, with the first 2 told in third person and the third told in first person. Now, this became a huge issue for me in books 2 and especially 3, as the point of view characters are very much alien beings with an alien perspective I found particularly loathsome. That being said, Xenogenesis is also, thankfully as it turned out, a rather short series. Each book, as you can see, is on the shorter end of the novel-length spectrum, and the prose felt very competently functional to me. By this, I guess I mean there was nothing particularly noteworthy about it in terms of aesthetics or, lyricism. But its quality, and the fact the story never deviates from a forward-facing narrative progression, allowed me to breeze through these books without missing a beat. So that was a plus. I'd say I've seen better overall when it comes to not overly sacrificing character work in older theming-driven SFF, but the character work you get for Lilith Eapo specifically, Dawn's main character, felt satisfyingly good, especially as it tied into the story's theming. Lilith, indeed, functions as a kind of Uncle Tom or Judas, great betrayer, etc. figure, and Butler did a very good job of showing the tragedy, the sheer horror, really, inherent in Lilith's situation. As someone who basically has to convince her fellow humans to submit to their new alien overlords, partners. Now, I had a really hard time relating to Lilith in book 1, even though I was fully aware at all times, basically, she was 1000% in survival mode and dealing with the, loathsome, rapey colonizer aliens. And even though I myself am a victim of grooming on a thankfully much smaller scale. But the crack cracks you see in her armor in book 2 and the way those were delivered effectively slam the empathy back into my heart. Unfortunately, Lilith is also the only human point of view and the only fully fleshed out human character you get in the trilogy as a whole. So let's talk about the Oankali. I give full marks to Butler for creating a truly alien feeling alien species. The Oankali are sentient, very much so, and have a civilization of sorts, yes, with advanced technology, though no real culture. They are very much not human, nor even animal in any meaningful sense of the word. They aren't really hive-minded in the traditional science fictional sense, but they certainly don't understand nor respect individuality really the way human beings do. Or can. Or maybe they do, but simply don't care. This ambiguity ties into the series' theming. The Oankali are colonizers. They have a ginormous superiority complex and an organic drive to assimilate other species regardless of their wishes. It is thus in their best interest to present themselves in a somewhat positive light to the human beings they wish to groom and hybridize with. And I doubted every single professed truth that came out of their mouths. Whilst the Oankali's species building, as it were, was very well done, with some caveats, their individual character work was not. The lack of individuality feels partially justified by the traits inherent to their species, but at the same time, this could only go so far for me. What's worse, Adulthood Rights and Imago's main characters are human Oankali hybrids, but they didn't feel even remotely human to me when they very much should have. Okay, maybe Adulthood Rights main character did a smidge, but still, that specific facet of the series was a massive fail for me overall. Additionally, this series has a huge, flabbergasting problem with gendered characterization. Holy shit. I've seen readers complain about the way gender is handled in something like, say, The Gate to Women's Country, and fair enough, yes. But, sorry, not sorry, Xenogenesis is 1,000 times worse for this. Putting aside the fact, for one thing, homosexuality is essentially mixed by the Oankali, and putting aside the fact Oankali clearly don't understand human beings whatever they say to the contrary, men and women are in fact shown in the text to conform to sexist stereotypes asserted as genetic fact and destiny by their alien oppressors. Despite the fact their sexual and reproductive agency is completely removed, women are all shown to desperately want babies, and all are just totally chill with, I don't know, having 10 to 15 of them with their alien overlords. Because women are all deeply submissive and maternal by default, right? The Oankali also state that hybrid males will never settle down into family life because they have inherited men's, but not women's, of course, fundamentally non-monogamous urges. Survivor men are prone to rape and aggression, which I'm not saying is entirely unrealistic in that scenario, but all of it is presented as genetic destiny, and gendered socialization might as well not exist. I hate this shit when male writers do it. I hate this shit when female writers do it. So I'm calling it out. It was repulsive. The Oankali certainly are the main event of Xenogenesis' science fictional quality. As I've already said, Butler did a brilliant job of making them feel truly alien, but failed, in my opinion, to convey the humanity that her hybrid characters should have had. The Oankali are shown and said to essentially lack culture in a way that feels a little unrealistic to me. You know what I mean, but fine. And all of their civilization points, if you will, are essentially spent in biotechnology and a highly pseudo-communalist / hive mind light social system that is principally mediated through direct neurochemical communication. Which brings me to their biology. A lot was done here in terms of sheer creativity, and I don't want to downplay that. But I'm also a nitpicky bitchworm, and some of the Oankali's biology felt a tad questionable to me, especially with regards to their reproductive categories and their reproduction wholesale. The Oankali are said to partially descend from aquatic creatures, at least that's an observation Lilith makes, and are covered in sensory tendrils. They're also smooth-skinned, I guess, and greyish in colouring. They also have tentacles instead of arms. Insert your tentacle porn joke of choice here. So yes, they look weird. Given the sexually violent, but not graphically so, I'll come back to this, content of the series, you could argue there's a body horror facet to Xenogenesis as well, actually. In any case, yes, the Oankali have 3 reproductive categories, or rather 2.5. In my opinion, given the Ualoi don't participate in procreation in the, well, at any rate, Terran sense. As I understood it, they contribute bits of their genetic material to their offspring, yes, but not gametes like the males and females do. More crucially, though, they ensure the equivalent of meiotic crossing over happens. At least that's my interpretation of the process. They can also consciously direct this process, and thus genetically engineer their offspring kind of up to a point, but it's never elaborated upon that much. Then there's the fact the female and male members of OG Oankali triads are always siblings. And I'm like, huh? Now to my mind, this may explain why the Ualoi evolved in the first place. It's also linked to some organelle they have, whatever, to correct the massive amounts of inbreeding that would presumably result from related males and females systematically mating. But then I'm like, sure, evolution doesn't always come up with elegant solutions, right? But this shit seems really convoluted to me. God damn. And even then, honestly, I'm just left with a feeling of, but why though? Am I overthinking this? Yes, of course, 100%, but I'm a world-building and theming-driven reader and a biology nerd, so that's that. Back to the colonizer self-image part of the Oankali equation, some things don't quite add up. For instance, they're always going on and on about how they can read species genomes, see their inherent flaws, and understand their deep nature, but then repeatedly show they are deeply ignorant when it comes to the process of socialization, the concepts of adaptability, brain plasticity, etc. when it comes to human beings. To the aliens, we are genetically doomed and we're always going to nuke ourselves into oblivion, so might as well let them take over and make babies with us, right? If that sounds convenient, that's because it is. The above contradictions sort of show the Oankali are not to be trusted because they are colonizers and will obviously paint themselves in a positive and superior light. This interpretative lens allowed me to swallow a lot of this, despite my deep aversion to it up to a point. There is, to my mind, also a legitimate hole in the logic of the aliens needing to mate with the apocalypse surviving humans, specifically when you are also told they could just clone humans from scratch and hybridize with those, and they kind of do that as well if I recall correctly. That's on the one hand, and when you are shown the Oankali clearly don't care about human culture or socialization on the other, so why bother playing along with any of that for them? Finally, there is a simple fact: the series as a whole does come comfortably close to endorsing genetic determinism outright. Now yes, most of that can be written off as reflecting the ideology or misunderstanding of the baddie aliens, but since you're only given their perspective past Dawn, given no truly free human character is ever given the opportunity to contest the aliens' propaganda, as it were, past book 1, and given the legitimately awful gendered characterization of the humans of the story, uncertainty started to creep in. Again, I don't want to care about authorial intent, and I generally don't. But past a certain point, I was like, the fuck am I actually meant to take away from all this? Because in the end, it all kind of boiled down to this: humans are smart, but oppressively hierarchical by default because something more or less monkey ancestors, etc. And, sorry, not sorry, but to that I say fucking bullshit and fucking citation needed. Sue me. As I've stated before, if you make me root for humanity this hard, you're doing something wrong. Still, I give major points to Xenogenesis for the quality of its theming, in book 1 at least, and 2 to a lesser extent. This trilogy goes hard with its thematic exploration of colonialism, genocidal assimilation, and then yes, I contend sexual exploitation that incorporates grooming. Those are very dark themes indeed, and their execution can feel relentlessly oppressive at times. There's a lot to feel uncomfortable about here, especially given the oppressing colonizers in this story are aliens from outer space. It's the whole rapey aliens go brrrr motif I memed with earlier. For the sake of completeness, I'll acknowledge you can also read theming on human beings' exploitation of non-human animals in this series, still through what the Oankali do to human beings. But pride of place, in my opinion, is definitely given to drawing parallels between their behavior and what humans have sadly done to their conspecifics at different points in history. The series' exposition and discussion of the different facets of colonialism and genocidal assimilation is, indeed, superbly and horrifically thorough. Also, to clarify, by genocidal assimilation, or soft genocide, I mean destroying a people by integrating them into the colonizers rather than by, violently massacring them. For instance, the Oankali, and I would happily die on this hill, are colonizers. And just like a lot of human colonizers throughout history, they present themselves as the benevolent, but superior, saviors of humankind. Everything they say is fundamentally self-serving, self-appraising, and should thus be taken with a truckload of salt. Does that mean they are evil incarnate and nothing but that? No! Just as it would be reductive to say that every single human being who belonged to a colonizing people was evil incarnate and nothing but that. But it doesn't change the fact that this shit is deeply morally reprehensible, even if the Oankali also do some things that could be seen in a positive light, such as their restoration of Earth and Earth life, their sharing of advanced genetic medicine, etc. These things benefit humanity, sure, but also come at the steepest of prices. So yes, colonialism and genocide are, to my mind, huge themes in Xenogenesis. But it is the series theming on sexual exploitation and grooming on their own and in relation to the former that I found the most viscerally impactful. I don't feel this aspect of the theming is discussed as much as the previous one, but as someone who has been groomed and raped in both mind and body, that shit just howled at me from the page. It's also kind of mind-blowing to me that there are readers who are incapable of seeing most, if not all, of the Oankali as, at least in part, self-serving, oppressive, arrogant, and rapey monsters. But I want to make it clear there's nothing inherently wrong with that. We all read things differently. Still, it's also mind-blowing to me there are readers who think the sex the humans of Lilith's cohort have with the Oankali is consensual in any meaningful sense of the word. By the time I was done with the series, I wanted to nuke the lot of those creepy spacefaring predators. But don't get me wrong, I find this aspect of the series' broader theming praiseworthy because it adds an interesting twist and layer of analysis to the Oankali's colonialism. Still, there's no getting around the fact it makes the story that much more uncomfortable to read. Additionally, there are a few different layers of fucked upness to the alien rapiness. There's a bit of Stockholm syndroming going on, for one thing, but also neurochemically induced grooming involving the manipulation of pheromones. That bit's overstated somewhat, but whatever, and neurotransmitters that make human beings physically desire the Oankali despite their deep emotional aversion to them. And, to the fact their agency is being curb-stomped pretty hard. The Oankali also make humans borderline addicted to their touch, their chemically induced mind orgasms, because there's no genital sex involved here. It all happens in the brain. They remove their ability to reproduce independently, and here's the extra fucked kicker: when humans bond with Oankali, they become repulsed by the touch of other human beings, even human beings they otherwise love. So not only can humans no longer have babies without the aliens say so, they can no longer make love or even freaking hug one another. Tell me that doesn't make you want to open fire on those tentacle fuckers. And the Oankali just do not understand, or don't want to, your mileage will vary here once again, that all of this is profoundly fucking wrong. Taking a page right out of the sexual predator playbook, Oankali additionally argue that if a human being's body wants to have sex with them because they freaking chemically orchestrated it that way, then it knows best, and it doesn't matter if that raw desire doesn't align with a person's mind, heart, what have you. If you orgasm from rape, that means you enjoyed it, and it wasn't really rape, right? It's exactly the same logic. I'm not going to lie here. This stuff was borderline triggering for me in places, precisely because it was so well executed. All of the nails were hit right on their heads in describing the here literal mindfuck of sexual violence that involves grooming of this nature and severity. So disturbing. Props for that. Xenogenesis's theming is hands down its best aspect. There is a lot of pernicious nuance involved in the dark processes it explores, and this was very skillfully illustrated in Dawn than Adulthood Writes. Indeed, the theming and most of the plot really pretty much runs its course by the end of book 2, and I found book 3, Imago, painfully pointless. An absolute waste of time. I would have been better off not reading at all. I actually skim-read the last 60 or so pages of it because I was just so done with the story and its flaws. Since nothing was added in terms of theming, the series' flaws became all the more glaring and I couldn't see, much less appreciate, anything else. Reading Imago felt like I was forced to wallow in the story's repulsive gendered characterization, uncontested genetic determinism, and yes, the rapey awfulness of its alien characters. And nothing was really added in terms of overarching plot either. I didn't enjoy Adulthood Writes as much as I did Dawn, but it still added something to the broader story. Not so with Imago, and forcing myself through it left me with a very bitter appreciation of the trilogy as a whole. Xenogenesis, in my opinion, should be read as a duology, and that is how I would recommend it to other readers, because yes, I would still recommend this story. At the very, very least, I would recommend Dawn, which I maintain is a very solid 7 out of 10. Adulthood Writes was a 6 to very soft 6.5 out of 10 for me, and worthwhile insofar as it provides a kind of conclusion to Xenogenesis's overarching story and completes the portrait of the Oankali, kind of. Imago, however, I rated with a 4 out of 10 and would, recommend you skip straight up. So I do not regret taking the time to read the series, except for Imago. But it's also clear to me I just don't vibe with Butler's fiction like I do with Le Guin's, for instance, A Tall Order, to be sure, but still. Nor even like I do with other older generation works of theme-rich, female-penned SFF, specifically. I loved Parable of the Sower, yes, but neither Kindred nor Xenogenesis have come even close to that level of quality for me. As such, Butler's fiction has lost a few priority points, and I'm in no rush to read anything else written by her. And that concludes my review of Octavia E. Butler's Xenogenesis trilogy. I hope you found it interesting, insightful, engaging, all the good things. I hope you will have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves. Thank you for the continued support, and I shall see you all hopefully reasonably soon. But until then, bye-bye.